Is your current mindset holding you back from wealth? Is your current mindset quietly holding you back from wealth without you even realizing it? Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they're operating with invisible mental limits they never question. Today, I want you to treat this video like a mirror, one that reveals the hidden beliefs, emotional patterns, and subconscious habits that are shaping your financial destiny. You're not here by accident. Something inside you is looking for expansion, for truth, for the next level of your life. And this conversation may be the turning point you've been waiting for. So take a breath, clear your mind, and prepare to see yourself and money in a completely new way. Topic 1. The Silent Saboteur. How your own mindset holds you back from wealth. If you've ever felt stuck, truly stuck, in your financial life, as if no matter how hard you try, things just don't shift, then I want you to consider something that most people never dare to examine. What if the barrier isn't outside of you, but inside your own mind? This isn't about blaming yourself or criticizing your effort. It's about understanding that your mindset is the operating system through which every decision, every risk, every opportunity, and every belief about money gets filtered. And if that operating system is outdated or corrupted by old fears, inherited limitations, or unconscious doubts, then wealth can't flow. Not because it's impossible, but because your mind keeps rejecting the upgrade. Most people never notice how this inner sabotage works because it's subtle. You want more money, yet deep down you feel unprepared. You want a new career or business opportunity, yet something inside whispers that you might fail. You imagine a wealthier version of yourself, yet part of you feels unworthy of that life. Those internal contradictions shape your reality far more than you realize. While you consciously reach for abundance, your subconscious pulls you back toward what feels familiar. This is why you may find yourself repeating the same income level year after year, or why you might experience a brief financial improvement only to return to your old baseline. It's not because you're incapable. It's because your mindset is wired to protect you from the unfamiliar, even when the unfamiliar is exactly what you want. Consider the story of Howard Schultz, who grew up in a housing project in Brooklyn. His father struggled emotionally and financially. From a societal standpoint, nothing pointed toward Schultz becoming the CEO of Starbucks and building a multi-billion-dollar empire. But his mindset, his unbreakable belief in a life beyond his circumstances, became stronger than the limitations surrounding him. Contrast that with countless people who grow up in similar environments but never escape the cycle of scarcity. The difference is not luck. The difference is not intelligence. The difference is the mindset blueprint they're operating from. Your mindset acts like an internal thermostat for wealth. If you have beliefs that say, "I'm not ready, success is dangerous, money will make people judge me," or "I'll never be like those wealthy people," then it doesn't matter how many books you read or strategies you try, your subconscious will enforce the old temperature. It will pull you back to the financial identity it believes is safe. And because these beliefs usually operate in silence, people rarely identify them as the cause. They blame external forces, the economy, other people, timing, their upbringing. But the real block is invisible and internal. Think about someone like Sarah Blakely, who built Spanx into a global powerhouse. She didn't come from wealth. She didn't have investors. What she did have was a mindset that asked, "Why not me?" She believed in her idea, and she believed in her ability to learn, adapt, and persist. That belief wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, and it guided her decisions even when fear was present. Her story is a reminder that wealth responds to mindset before it responds to money. If she had listened to the inner voice of doubt, she would have stayed in her old job selling fax machines and the world would have never known her name. Now think about your own life. Every opportunity you've taken or rejected, every financial choice you've made, every moment you've hesitated, every time you convinced yourself to wait just a little longer, all of it was shaped by your mindset. Even your income today is a mirror of what you believe you're capable of earning. This is a difficult truth for many people because it confronts the illusion that external circumstances alone determine our level of wealth. But if that were true, everyone with the same background would have the same financial results. And they don't. Some rise, some stay the same, some fall lower, and the distinguishing factor is always internal. When your mindset hasn't evolved beyond your past, it becomes impossible to step into a new financial reality. You can desire wealth with all your heart, but if you still identify with scarcity, struggle, or survival, then you'll unconsciously behave in ways that reinforce those identities. You'll say no to opportunities that scare you. You'll delay actions that might elevate you. You'll remain loyal to the version of yourself that life has already outgrown. It's not laziness, it's self-protection disguised as logic. This is why lottery winners lose everything in a few years. Their bank account changed, but their mindset didn't. And because they were still operating from the identity of someone who didn't believe they could sustain wealth, they sabotaged it until their outer reality matched their inner beliefs again. Meanwhile, entrepreneurs who fail multiple times rise again because they don't accept failure as identity. They see it as part of the process. Their mindset carries them forward long before the money shows up. Now I want you to pause for a moment and sit with this question. How much wealth do you truly believe you're capable of handling? Not what you wish, what you believe, not what sounds impressive, what feels real. Because that belief is your energetic financial ceiling. And the ceiling will never lift unless your mindset expands first. Wealth is not something that happens to you when the conditions finally align. Wealth is something you grow into when your internal world finally aligns with the life you want to create. The most powerful and underestimated truth you can embrace is that the limitations in your mind were learned. They were absorbed from your environment, your childhood, your society, your past experiences. They are not who you are. They are simply patterns you've repeated for so long that they feel like your personality. And because they were learned, they can be unlearned. They can be replaced. They can be transformed, but only if you're willing to recognize them. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not incapable of wealth. You are simply operating on beliefs that no longer match the future you are trying to build. And there is nothing wrong with that unless you remain unaware of it. Your transformation begins with seeing your mindset clearly. Once you see it, you can change it. Once you change it, your decisions shift. Once your decisions shift, your life expands. And when your life expands, wealth is no longer something out of reach. It becomes the natural reflection of the identity you finally allowed yourself to step into. Topic 2. The Wealth Blueprint: How Your Past Programmed Your Financial Future. If you've ever wondered why some people seem naturally drawn to wealth while others constantly struggle to stay afloat, the answer lies in something most people never examine: their wealth blueprint. Just like an architectural blueprint determines the height, shape, and structure of a building, your internal blueprint dictates your financial destiny, how much wealth you allow yourself to create, keep, or lose. And the most surprising part is that this blueprint wasn't designed by you consciously. It was shaped long before you had the ability to question it. Think back to your childhood for a moment. Reflect on the conversations you heard about money, the emotions that surrounded financial decisions in your home, the beliefs your family carried without even realizing they were passing them on. Maybe you heard things like, money doesn't grow on trees, rich people are greedy, we can't afford that, or life is hard for people like us. Or maybe you grew up witnessing constant stress, arguments about bills, fear of losing jobs, tension around every purchase. Even if your parents meant well, these emotional imprints shape the way you view abundance today. They programmed your perception of what's normal, what's possible, and what's dangerous when it comes to wealth. And here's the truth most people never realize. Children don't question these patterns. They absorb them. They internalize them. They build an identity around them. If you grew up in a home where money was scarce, your subconscious may have concluded that scarcity is normal. If you grew up hearing negative beliefs about wealthy people, you may unconsciously push wealth away to avoid becoming what you were taught to judge. If you grew up with financial chaos, you may recreate chaos in adulthood because it feels strangely familiar, even if consciously you crave stability. Your past experiences become your programming, and your programming becomes your reality. Now, think about someone like Oprah Winfrey. She grew up with poverty, trauma, and adversity that would have crushed most people. But at some point, she became aware that the beliefs she inherited were not the beliefs she wanted to build her life around. She rewired her internal blueprint. She chose a new narrative. And that choice, more than talent, timing, or opportunity, became the foundation of her staggering success. The world sees the billionaire, the media icon, the empire. But the true transformation happened inside her mind long before the success appeared. The same is true for countless entrepreneurs who came from nothing and rose to extraordinary heights. They upgraded their internal blueprint. They refused to let their past define their wealth. And this is exactly where you must begin if you want to transform your financial future. Your wealth blueprint determines what you expect from life. It determines the opportunities you notice, the risks you take, the habits you practice, and the level of abundance you believe is available to you. If your blueprint says wealth is unsafe, your subconscious will sabotage it. If it says wealth is unattainable, you'll never pursue it fully. If it says wealth is reserved for other people, you'll withdraw from opportunities before they even have a chance to grow. This is why two people can start from the same place and end up in completely different financial realities. Their mindsets are operating on different programs. But here's the empowering truth. A blueprint is not destiny. It's simply a plan that can be changed. You are not bound to the financial patterns of your childhood. You are not obligated to repeat the limitations of your past. You are not required to accept the beliefs you were taught by people who were doing the best they could with their own unexamined mindset. Once you become aware of your blueprint, you gain the power to redesign it. And that redesign becomes the foundation for an entirely new life. Think about Amazon's origin story. Jeff Bezos didn't build the world's most powerful company by following the blueprint of ordinary thinking. He didn't ask, "What's normal?" He asked, "What's possible?" And he operated from a mindset that wasn't shaped by fear or conformity, but by vision, expansion, and willingness to stretch beyond the familiar. His blueprint was created by curiosity, not caution, by imagination, not limitation. And the result was a company that rewrote the rules of global commerce. You may not be building the next Amazon, but you are building something even more important, the next version of yourself. And that version must be built on a blueprint that reflects abundance, capability, confidence, and possibility, not scarcity, doubt, or fear. One of the most damaging but common beliefs people inherit is the idea that wealth must be earned through struggle. They watch their parents work endlessly, sacrifice relentlessly, and still barely get ahead. So they internalize the idea that money is hard to get and even harder to keep. When opportunities arise that promise ease or abundance, they resist them because they don't fit the pattern. They feel too good to be true, when in reality, they're simply unfamiliar. Other people grow up believing wealth creates problems. They hear stories of relatives fighting over money. They watch people lose their integrity, friendships, or peace when financial issues emerge. So they develop an unconscious fear that wealth will destroy something in their life. As a result, they push it away, not consciously, but emotionally. Your wealth blueprint is written in emotions, not logic, and emotions always win. But imagine what happens when you begin to rewrite this blueprint. When you stop seeing money as scarce and begin seeing it as abundant. When you stop viewing wealth as dangerous and begin viewing it as liberating. When you stop fearing financial success and begin expecting it. You think differently, you act differently, you decide differently, and your life begins to shift in ways that once felt impossible. Companies like Apple, Tesla, Google all began as ideas powered by minds that refused to inherit the limitations of the world around them. They weren't following society's blueprint. They were creating a new one, and you have that same creative power within you. Wealth is not just about money. It's about identity. It's about permission. It's about becoming the kind of person who allows abundance to flow because they no longer fear it or doubt their ability to sustain it. I want you to consider something deeply. If you had been raised in a wealthy family that constantly affirmed your potential, encouraged your dreams, celebrated your success, and modeled abundance as normal, would you still think about money the way you do now? Probably not. That alone proves your current beliefs are not permanent. They are simply inherited patterns that can be replaced. The moment you decide to question your blueprint, you start to break the financial ceiling you've lived under for years. You begin to disconnect from the past and step into the identity of someone who is meant to build a thriving, wealthy, abundant future. And once that shift begins internally, the external world has no choice but to respond. Topic 3. The identity factor. why you can only create the wealth you believe you deserve. There is a truth about wealth that most people never understand, even after years of trying to change their financial life. You will never rise above the identity you hold about yourself. You can want more money, you can desire success, you can dream of abundance, but your identity, your deepest sense of who you are, will always pull you back to the level you believe is normal for you. Identity is the anchor. Identity is the thermostat. Identity is the gravitational force that shapes every choice you make. And until that identity expands, wealth cannot. You might think money is about habits, strategies, luck, or timing. But beneath all of that is the simple yet powerful question. Who do you believe you are? Not who you tell others you are, not who you wish you were, but who you feel you are at your core when no one is watching. That feeling dictates your relationship with wealth. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you will struggle. If you see yourself as someone who barely gets by, you will barely get by. If you see yourself as someone who always makes mistakes with money, that's exactly what you will continue to do. Your mind works tirelessly to keep your life consistent with your internal identity, even when that identity contradicts your dreams. This is why people who suddenly receive unexpected money, through a bonus, inheritance, or lottery winnings, often lose it just as quickly. Their identity hasn't grown to match the new level of abundance. Their internal wiring still sees them as the person who never had wealth, so they unconsciously make decisions that align with the old identity, not the new financial reality. Their emotions feel overwhelmed, their beliefs feel threatened, and their behavior becomes a self-correcting mechanism that pulls them back into the familiar. On the other hand, look at someone like Elon Musk. Whether you agree with his methods or not, one thing is undeniable. Musk operates from an identity far removed from mediocrity, limitation, or hesitation. His internal belief is that he is someone who reshapes industries, challenges assumptions, and solves problems at global scale. That identity drives his behavior long before any tangible success emerges. Even after failures with SpaceX, even after Tesla nearly collapsed, his identity didn't waver. He didn't see himself as someone struggling. He saw himself as someone destined to achieve extraordinary things. And that self-image created a gravitational pull that eventually aligned his outer world with his inner conviction. But identity doesn't form overnight. It's shaped through repetition, through the stories you've told yourself for years. Perhaps you were told that life is tough, that you must be realistic, that you shouldn't dream too big, that you should be grateful for what you have and not desire more. These messages may seem harmless, but they work like psychological cement. They harden into an identity that rejects growth because growth feels unfamiliar, threatening, or selfish. And if your identity rejects abundance, no strategy in the world can override that rejection. Let's be honest. How many times have you wanted to take a step toward wealth, but something inside you hesitated? Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was self-doubt. Maybe it was an internal voice whispering, "Who do you think you are to aim that high?" That voice is identity speaking. It's trying to keep you safe. But safe is not the same as prosperous. Safe keeps you in the comfort zone, and the comfort zone is a financial cage disguised as stability. Think of identity like a script you follow without questioning. If your script says you're someone who always saves others but never yourself, you'll avoid wealth because wealth feels selfish. If your script says you're the responsible one who holds everything together, you may take on more financial burdens than you should. If your script says you're always the underdog, you may unconsciously create situations that force you to struggle just to prove that identity true. But here's where everything changes. Identity is not fixed. It's not destiny. It's not a life sentence. It's simply a story you've repeated long enough to believe. And the moment you begin rewriting that story, your financial life changes with it. You can shift from "I am someone who struggles" to "I am someone who rises." You can shift from "I am someone who gets lucky occasionally" to "I am someone who consistently creates opportunities." You can shift from "I am someone who hopes for wealth" to "I am someone who embodies wealth." Look at Sarah Blakely again. Before she became a billionaire, she identified as someone who would succeed no matter what. She didn't wait for evidence. She didn't wait for validation. She didn't wait for permission. She stepped into the identity first, and the world eventually matched it. That's how powerful identity is. It leads reality, instead of following it. Identity is the foundation of manifestation. When you attempt to attract wealth from a place of unworthiness, the vibration collapses. You cannot manifest what you secretly believe you don't deserve. You cannot receive what you're internally pushing away. And you cannot hold on to what your identity rejects as unsafe or unrealistic. This is why wealthy people continue to become wealthier. Their identity supports abundance. They don't see wealth as rare or fragile. They see it as normal, expected, and aligned with who they are. They interpret setbacks differently. They interpret risk differently. They interpret opportunity differently. They act from an identity that says, I belong at this level. And this is why people stuck in scarcity remain stuck. Their identity keeps them repeating the same cycles, behaviors, emotional triggers, and financial patterns, even when they desperately want something new. It's not because they're incapable, it's because their identity hasn't expanded yet. I want you to consider something profound. What if the biggest transformation in your wealth journey is not learning a new skill, not starting a new business, not investing in a new opportunity, but simply becoming a new version of yourself? A version that sees wealth as natural, a version that sees opportunity everywhere, a version that trusts its ability to create, hold, and multiply abundance, a version that makes decisions from confidence, not fear, a version that no longer carries the emotional weight of the past. Wealth responds to identity before it responds to action. When you change who you believe you are, your choices shift automatically. You take more aligned risks, you attract different people, you interpret circumstances in ways that benefit you, you stop sabotaging yourself, you stop shrinking, you stop doubting, you stop apologizing for wanting more. You begin to operate as the person you were always meant to become, a person whose identity is anchored in abundance, purpose, clarity, and unstoppable growth. The moment your identity evolves, your financial reality has no choice but to evolve with it. It may not happen overnight, but it begins immediately. And from that moment on, wealth is no longer something you chase. Wealth becomes something you embody. Topic 4. The emotional frequency of wealth. Why your feelings decide your financial destiny. If you've ever wondered why some people seem to attract wealth effortlessly while others fight for every inch of financial progress, the answer often lies not in their intelligence, not in their opportunities, and not even in their work ethic, but in their emotional frequency. Your emotions are not just reactions. They are signals, magnets, and energetic instructions that shape the way life responds to you. What you feel consistently becomes your internal vibration, and that vibration influences the people you meet, the choices you make, the risks you take, the opportunities you notice, and the level of abundance you allow yourself to receive. Your emotions are the compass that guides your financial life. When you consistently feel fear, money becomes something you avoid. When you feel guilt, money becomes something you sabotage. When you feel unworthy, money becomes something you chase but never catch. But when you feel deserving, money becomes something that naturally flows toward you. When you feel safe, money becomes something you can hold. When you feel grateful, money becomes something that multiplies. This is not abstract spirituality. It is human psychology, neuroscience, and behavior interacting in a powerful loop that most people never recognize. Consider how you react emotionally when you think about wealth. Do you feel excitement or anxiety, possibility or pressure, empowerment or overwhelm? Your emotional response reveals your relationship with abundance. Many people say they want wealth, yet the idea of receiving large amounts of money triggers fear. Fear of judgment, fear of responsibility, fear of losing it, fear of failing publicly, fear of not being enough to sustain it. That fear becomes the emotional frequency that governs their financial decisions. They play small because small feels safer. They decline opportunities that require courage. They talk themselves out of dreams that feel too big. They stay loyal to their comfort zone because expansion activates emotional discomfort. But if you look at the wealthiest individuals in the world, people like Warren Buffett, Richard Branson, or Oprah, you'll notice something powerful. They operate from emotional stability, not emotional chaos. They don't make decisions from fear. They don't shrink away from risk because of anxiety. They don't avoid challenges because they might fail. Their emotional frequency is aligned with confidence, curiosity, empowerment, and inner certainty. and that alignment allows them to make choices most people can't even imagine making. Your emotions dictate your behavior far more than logic does. You can rationally know the right action to take, invest, save, start a project, seize an opportunity. But if your emotional frequency is dominated by fear, self-doubt, or insecurity, you won't take that action. Or you'll take it hesitantly and reverse it at the first sign of discomfort. This is why personal development programs that focus solely on information often fail. You don't need more information. You need a different emotional state, because your emotional state determines your decisions, and your decisions determine your destiny. Think of the first time Jeff Bezos told people he was leaving a stable, prestigious job to start an online bookstore in the 1990s. Almost everyone thought it was absurd. But Bezos wasn't operating from fear. He was operating from emotional conviction. His emotional frequency was expansion, vision, and possibility. He felt aligned with the future he could sense, even when others couldn't see it. And that emotional alignment became the foundation for Amazon, a company that reshaped the world economy. Now contrast this with someone who wants to start a business today but procrastinates for years. It's rarely because they lack intelligence or opportunity. It's because they feel afraid of failing, afraid of being judged, afraid of making the wrong choice, afraid of losing what they have. Their emotional frequency stalls their actions stall their growth, and their growth stalls their wealth. The cycle repeats not because they are incapable, but because they are emotionally misaligned with the abundance they desire. Your emotional frequency is shaped by your past experiences, your beliefs, your conditioning, and your internal stories. If your emotional experience with money has been stressful, painful, or disappointing, then your emotional frequency will reflect that. You might tense up whenever a financial decision appears. You might expect things to go wrong. You might prepare for loss rather than anticipate gain. You might cling tightly to money because you fear it won't return. This emotional contraction creates a vibration of scarcity that pushes wealth away. But emotions can be retrained. They can be replaced. They can be elevated. You can shift from fear to courage, from doubt to trust, from insecurity to empowerment. And when you do, your entire financial reality begins to shift with you. Opportunities appear not because they're new, but because you're finally open to seeing them. People respond differently because your energy feels different. You begin to make decisions that align with abundance instead of scarcity. You begin to behave like someone who expects wealth instead of someone who fears it. Think of Tony Robbins, who openly shares how his early life was filled with financial struggle. His emotional association with money was initially one of pain, stress, and survival. But he rewired that emotional pattern. He replaced fear with certainty, insecurity with confidence, scarcity with belief. And that emotional transformation not only changed his life, it allowed him to help millions transform theirs. His wealth didn't come from strategy alone. It came from emotional mastery. Wealth is emotional. It is energetic. It is psychological. You attract what matches your emotional frequency. When you cultivate emotions of confidence, gratitude, expectation, and empowerment, you align with the vibration of abundance. You begin to operate as if wealth is natural for you, and that internal shift changes everything. You stop questioning your worth. You stop fearing success. You stop apologizing for your dreams. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You start stepping into a higher version of yourself. And here's the most powerful truth. Emotional frequency is a choice. It's not automatic. It's not random. It's not something you're stuck with. You may not control every feeling that arises, but you can choose which ones you feed and which ones you release. You can choose the emotional home you return to daily. And if your emotional home becomes a place of abundance, confidence, and self-belief, then wealth becomes inevitable, not because the world changes, but because you do. Your emotional frequency is the silent language through which you communicate with life. It tells life what you expect, what you allow, what you believe you deserve, and what you're prepared to receive. And when that frequency aligns with abundance, the world responds in ways that seem miraculous, but are simply the natural outcome of inner transformation. Topic 5. The wealth behaviors you don't see. How daily patterns shape your financial reality. There's a moment in life when people wake up and ask themselves a question they've avoided for years. Why am I still not wealthy? They look at their effort, their intelligence, their education, their dreams, and yet something still isn't aligned. The answer is rarely found in the big decisions. It's hidden in the small, subtle behaviors that shape your identity, determine your actions, and quietly create your financial reality. Wealth isn't built in dramatic bursts of effort. It's built in patterns. It's built in the choices you make when no one is watching. It's built in the habits that seem insignificant in the moment but become monumental over time. Every wealthy person you admire today, whether it's Warren Buffett, Oprah Winfrey, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, or Sarah Blakely, has one thing in common. Their behaviors were aligned with wealth long before the money showed up. Buffett was reading financial reports in his teens while others were distracted. Oprah was developing her voice, her empathy, and her communication skills long before fame. Bezos cultivated long-term thinking and strategic thinking years before Amazon existed. Musk trained himself to tolerate pressure, risk, and uncertainty before Tesla or SpaceX ever achieved success. These behaviors were not accidents. They were foundations. Your daily behaviors reveal what you truly believe you deserve. You can say you want wealth, but if your behaviors show fear, hesitation, inconsistency, procrastination, or avoidance, then you're not building a foundation for abundance. You are reinforcing a cycle of limitation. Wealth responds not to your desires, but to your discipline. Not to your dreams, but to your decisions. Not to your intentions, but to your patterns. Think about your mornings. Do you wake up with clarity, purpose, and a mindset of opportunity? Or do you start the day in reaction mode, checking notifications, absorbing stress, comparing yourself to others, and feeding doubt before your mind is fully awake? That first hour of your day sets the tone for your financial energy. Wealthy people protect their mornings because they know the mind is most powerful when it is undisturbed. They fuel it with focus, not noise. They begin the day by deciding how they will show up, not by responding to what the world demands from them. Now think about your evenings. Do you reflect, evaluate, and adjust your trajectory? Or do you numb yourself with distraction, scrolling endlessly, watching content to avoid emotion, escaping reality instead of shaping it? Wealthy individuals end their day with intention. They think about what worked, what didn't, what can improve. They don't punish themselves for mistakes. They learn from them. And this constant cycle of self-awareness is what creates exponential growth over time. Then there's the behavior that sabotages more dreams than failure ever could: emotional reactivity. When unexpected expenses appear, do you panic? When opportunities arise, do you freeze? When challenges occur, do you collapse inward, expecting the worst? Emotional reactivity drains your capacity to think creatively, make empowered decisions, and sustain momentum. Wealthy individuals feel emotions just like everyone else, but they don't let those emotions control their path. They build emotional resilience, and that resilience becomes one of their greatest financial assets. Consider the difference between someone who sees a problem and stops versus someone who sees a problem and strategizes. Elon Musk once said that entrepreneurship is like chewing glass while staring into the abyss. He meant that challenges are inevitable, but persistence is a choice. Most people retreat when they hit emotional discomfort. Wealthy people lean in, analyze, adapt, and continue. It's not that they enjoy struggle, it's that they refuse to allow struggle to define their identity. Another behavior that determines wealth is your relationship with time. Many people treat time as something to pass. Wealthy individuals treat time as something to invest. They understand that every hour spent complaining, doubting, or procrastinating is an hour stolen from their future. They choose actions that move them forward, even if those actions are small. They value progress over perfection. They value consistency over intensity. They know that big leaps are rare, but small steps compound. Look at Amazon. For years, the company wasn't profitable. Analysts said it would fail. The public doubted its future. But Bezos focused on long-term compounding, small efficiencies, small improvements, small reinvestments that eventually created an unstoppable global force. Most people would have quit long before Amazon ever became successful. But Bezos wasn't guided by impatience. He was guided by behaviors aligned with his long-term identity and vision. Then there's the behavior of self-trust. Wealthy individuals trust themselves to figure things out. They trust their ability to learn, they trust their creativity, they trust their resilience. And because they trust themselves, they act boldly. Most people hesitate not because they lack ability, but because they lack self-trust. They fear making the wrong decision, so they make no decision at all. They fear looking foolish, so they hide. They fear risk, so they cling to safety, even when safety is the very thing holding them back. You cannot create wealth if you don't trust yourself. Wealth demands responsibility, decision-making, emotional maturity, and the courage to venture into unfamiliar territories. If your behaviors show that you avoid responsibility, delay decisions, or collapse under uncertainty, then your mind concludes that you're not ready for wealth, and it will block it accordingly. But here's the most empowering truth. Behaviors can be changed. And when your behaviors shift, your identity shifts. And when your identity shifts, your wealth shifts. You don't need to transform everything overnight. You simply need to begin behaving like your wealthier self before the wealth arrives. The wealthy identity must come first. The wealthy results come after. Imagine living one day as the wealthiest version of you. How would you walk? How would you speak? How would you decide? How would you plan? How would you invest your time, your attention, your energy? That version of you already exists. It is waiting for you to align your behaviors with its vibration. Every time you act like the poorer version of yourself, you reinforce scarcity. Every time you act like the wealthier version of yourself, you reinforce abundance. Wealth is not a destination. It's a practice. It's a set of behaviors repeated consistently until they redefine who you are and what you attract. The wealthy version of you is not in the future. It's in your behaviors today. And the moment you realize that, the path to abundance becomes clear, inevitable, and deeply empowering. Topic 6. The money blocks you don't recognize. Hidden fears that sabotage your wealth. Every person who struggles with money believes their problem is external. They think the economy is the issue, or the job market, or the lack of opportunities, or the lack of connections, or the absence of luck. But the truth, perhaps the most uncomfortable truth in the journey to wealth, is that the majority of financial struggle does not come from the outside world. It comes from internal blocks you don't even realize you have. These blocks are subtle, quiet, and deceptive. They don't announce themselves. They shape your behavior in ways you never question. And as long as they remain hidden, they sabotage your wealth no matter how intelligent, talented, or hardworking you are. Hidden money blocks often come from emotional fears you've never been taught to confront. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of judgment, fear of responsibility, fear of disappointment, fear of not being enough, fear of losing everything after finally achieving it. These fears create tension in your body, discomfort in your decisions, hesitation in your actions, and confusion in your financial path. You want wealth, but part of you fears it. You desire expansion, but part of you resists it. And this internal conflict creates a psychological tug-of-war that drains your momentum and limits your results. Imagine wanting to run forward while someone is holding your shirt from behind. You feel the desire to progress, but something keeps snapping you back. That something is not laziness. It's not incompetence. It's not a lack of ability. It's an internal block, a belief inherited from your past or formed during moments of emotional vulnerability. And unless you bring awareness to it, you remain trapped in patterns you didn't consciously choose. One of the most common hidden blocks is the fear of losing control. Wealth expands your options. It gives you freedom. But freedom can be terrifying to people who've been conditioned to feel safe only within limitation. When you have more money, you face new decisions, new expectations, new responsibilities. And if you've been taught to fear making mistakes or to avoid risk, wealth can feel overwhelming instead of empowering. So your subconscious protects you by keeping wealth at a distance. It's not rejecting money. It's rejecting the emotional discomfort you associate with it. Another block is the fear of outgrowing your environment. Many people fear that success will separate them from the people they love. They're afraid of becoming different, of being judged, of being resented, of being misunderstood. Subconsciously, they believe wealth will isolate them, that it will make them a target, that it will create tension with family or friends. And because humans are wired to seek belonging, the mind will sacrifice prosperity if it believes prosperity threatens connection. Think about how many people shrink their dreams because they don't want to appear arrogant, or how many people avoid opportunities because they don't want others to feel inferior, or how many people stay financially small because they fear the emotional consequences of becoming big. These blocks are invisible, yet they shape everything. A perfect example is seen in the early life of Howard Schultz, the architect of Starbucks' global empire. Schultz came from poverty, and his early relationship with money was tied to struggle and emotional pain. When he began to rise, he faced an internal conflict. Could he honor his roots while becoming wealthy? Could he expand without losing the identity he knew so well? Schultz had to confront the emotional block that said, "Wealth will disconnect me from where I came from." Not only by rewriting that belief did he unlock the next level of success. It wasn't just business strategy that made Starbucks a global force. It was Schultz transforming his internal fears about money. Another hidden block is the fear of disappointment. People avoid big goals not because they lack ambition, but because they fear the emotional crash of failing. They tell themselves, "If I don't try, I can't be disappointed." They set small goals to protect their hearts. They play safe to avoid pain. But that emotional shield becomes a financial prison. Wealth requires vulnerability. It requires the courage to want more, even when wanting more exposes you to the possibility of falling short. Then there's the fear of visibility. Wealth makes you visible. Success attracts attention, and attention can feel threatening to people who've learned to stay small to avoid criticism. Many people sabotage their progress the moment they begin to rise because the spotlight feels too bright. They retreat into old patterns, retreat into comfort, retreat into invisibility. Not because they don't want success, but because the emotional weight of being seen feels unbearable. This is why self-sabotage occurs right before major breakthroughs. The mind panics. It says, "This is unfamiliar." It says, "This is unsafe." It says, "This is too much responsibility." And so you procrastinate, overspend, avoid, hide, or collapse. You interpret this as personal failure, but it's emotional protection. Look at someone like Oprah, who faced more emotional adversity in her childhood than most people could imagine. Her rise was not just a rise in income, it was a rise in emotional capacity. She had to confront fears of visibility, worthiness, and identity. She had to rewrite the emotional meanings she attached to success. Without healing her money blocks, she would never have become a billionaire. Her wealth was born from emotional mastery, not financial strategy. The most powerful hidden block of all is the fear of not being enough. This fear whispers, "Who do you think you are?" It whispers, "You're not ready." It whispers, "You're not worthy of more." And because the subconscious mind wants to avoid emotional pain, it prevents you from pursuing opportunities in the first place. It convinces you to stay where you are. It convinces you to settle. It convinces you that dreaming is dangerous. But here is the truth that can change your entire financial life. Your hidden blocks are illusions. They feel real because you've lived with them for so long. But they are not part of your identity. They are emotional echoes from your past, echoes that can fade the moment you bring awareness to them. Awareness dissolves the block. Naming the fear weakens it. Understanding the pattern gives you the power to break it. And once you dismantle these emotional barriers, the path to wealth becomes clearer, smoother, and infinitely more attainable. Wealth is not just about acquiring money. It's about removing the emotional obstacles that make you feel unsafe receiving it. It's about becoming someone who welcomes abundance rather than resisting it. It's about healing old wounds so your future doesn't carry the weight of your past. You were not born with these blocks. You inherited them. You absorbed them. You learned them. And because they were learned, they can be unlearned. Your mind is not your enemy. It is simply trying to protect you with outdated patterns that no longer serve you. Once you begin to release these hidden fears, wealth stops being a struggle. It becomes a natural extension of who you are. The door that once felt locked suddenly opens, not because the world changed, but because you did. Topic 7. The power of self-belief. Why millionaires trust themselves before anyone else does. If there is one trait that separates wealthy individuals from those who never reach financial freedom, it is not genius, privilege, education, or luck. It is self-belief, not the shallow kind that appears in motivational quotes or the temporary boost that comes from hearing a powerful speech. I'm talking about the deep, unshakable, soul-level conviction that you are capable of creating, sustaining, and expanding wealth. This type of belief cannot be forced. It cannot be faked. It must be built from within, brick by brick, decision by decision, moment by moment, until you trust yourself more than you trust your fears. Self-belief is not about arrogance. It is not about pretending to know everything. It is about trusting your ability to learn, grow, adapt, and figure things out no matter what obstacles arise. Wealthy individuals do not believe in their perfection, they believe in their resilience. They do not believe they will never fail. They believe they will rise from failure stronger than before. They do not wait for certainty before taking action. They create certainty through action itself. And that is why they succeed where others freeze. Think about Jeff Bezos when he left his stable Wall Street job to pursue an online bookstore, an idea many people dismissed as laughable. Bezos did not have proof his idea would work. He did not have a guarantee of success. What he had was self-belief. He trusted his vision more than he feared judgment. He trusted his instincts more than he feared uncertainty. And that belief allowed him to take steps others would have never dared. Amazon wasn't built on confidence from the world. It was built on confidence from within. Now contrast that with someone who spends years waiting for the right moment, the perfect conditions, or absolute clarity. They tell themselves they are being responsible, but in truth, they are waiting for permission that will never come. The wealthy do not wait for external validation. They validate themselves. They don't need applause before beginning. They don't need approval before moving. They don't need reassurance before taking risks. Their internal voice speaks louder than the noise of the world. Self-belief is the foundation of initiative. Without it, you hesitate. You overthink. You talk yourself out of opportunities. You second-guess your intuition. You imagine every possible failure before imagining a single success. You take one step forward and two steps back because your inner narrative whispers, "I'm not ready, I'm not good enough," or "someone else could do this better than me." And those beliefs do not stay on the inside. They manifest in your results. But here is where the breakthrough happens. Self-belief is a practice, not a gift. You don't wake up with it. You cultivate it through experience. You strengthen it through repeated acts of courage. You nourish it by choosing growth over fear. Think of Oprah Winfrey, who overcame a childhood of trauma, poverty, and emotional wounds that would have destroyed many people. She did not start with fame, fortune, or confidence. She built confidence through every challenge she overcame. She built self-belief by refusing to let her past define her worth. And that belief became the foundation for her empire. Self-belief is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to act despite fear. Many assume that wealthy people feel no fear when making decisions, but that is a myth. They feel fear deeply, sometimes more intensely because the stakes are bigger, but they choose not to surrender to it. They don't wait for fear to disappear. They move with it, through it, and beyond it. They understand that fear is a signal, not a stop sign, a message to prepare, not a command to retreat. Millionaires trust themselves because they have evidence of their own strength. They have a track record of surviving challenges, adapting to uncertainty, and learning new skills. You have that track record too. You simply haven't recognized it. Every hardship you've overcome, every problem you've solved, every moment you pushed through discomfort has prepared you for more. But if you don't acknowledge your victories, your mind forgets your power. Self-belief grows when you honor your resilience. Look at Elon Musk, who nearly lost both Tesla and SpaceX in the same year. Investors doubted him. The media mocked him. Experts predicted his failure. But Musk trusted himself more than he trusted the world's skepticism. That self-belief didn't guarantee success, but it kept him in the game long enough for success to become inevitable. Without self-belief, he would have quit. Without self-belief, he would have gone bankrupt. Without self-belief, we would not have reusable rockets or electric vehicles reshaping industries today. Your life is not limited by opportunities. It is limited by your willingness to believe you can handle them. When an opportunity comes, do you say, "I can do this?" Or do you say, "I hope I don't mess this up"? When someone offers you a challenge, do you feel excitement or dread? When you imagine your wealthiest future self, do you see someone capable or someone overwhelmed? Your internal dialogue is writing your destiny. Wealth responds to confidence the way a compass responds to magnetic fields. When you believe you can create wealth, your actions align with that belief. You take risks aligned with growth. You commit more fully. You experiment more boldly. You persist longer. You recover quicker. You stop treating mistakes as confirmation of inadequacy and start treating them as data. This is how wealthy people expand. They are guided by inner certainty, not external reassurance. But how does someone build self-belief when they've spent years doubting themselves? The answer begins with identity. You must stop seeing yourself as the person who struggles and start seeing yourself as the person who rises. You must release the old narrative that says wealth is for others and embrace the story that says wealth is your birthright. You must talk to yourself the way a mentor talks to a rising achiever, not the way a critic talks to someone undeserving. Self-belief is reinforced through small wins. When you complete a task you avoided, you strengthen it. When you make a decision quickly instead of endlessly debating, you strengthen it. When you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen it. Consistency compounds, confidence compounds, and over time, your internal identity evolves into the version of you who expects success instead of fearing it. Wealthy individuals operate as if success is their natural state, not because they are arrogant, but because they have trained their minds to trust themselves. They assume things will work out. They assume they will adapt. They assume they will find solutions. And life often responds to them in exactly that way. You can build that level of self-belief, not through force, not through wishing, but through choosing to show up as the wealthiest version of yourself every single day. The version who trusts their intuition, the version who makes decisions boldly, the version who refuses to apologize for ambition. The version who understands that self-belief is not optional. It is the entry ticket to the life you desire. Once you trust yourself, the world begins to trust you too. Opportunities open, people gravitate toward you, resources flow more easily, and wealth becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Not because you were born special, but because you finally allowed yourself to become powerful. Topic 8. The Prosperity Action Shift. How aligning intention with action creates real wealth. There is a moment in every person's life when the gap between who they are and who they want to become becomes impossible to ignore. You feel it as restlessness, as dissatisfaction, as an inner pull toward more meaning, more purpose, more abundance, more life. Yet most people never bridge the gap. Not because they don't know what they want, but because their actions never align with their intentions. They intend to change, but their behavior remains tied to their past. They desire wealth, but their actions reinforce scarcity. They dream of abundance, yet live as though prosperity is a distant fantasy instead of an identity they can step into. This misalignment is one of the biggest reasons people stay financially stuck. Intention creates clarity, but action creates reality. If the two don't match, you feel stuck, frustrated, and confused, as though life is ignoring your efforts. But life isn't ignoring you. Your actions simply aren't aligned with the wealth you say you want. Think about someone who intends to build a business, but spends most of their time consuming content instead of creating. Or someone who intends to save money but sabotages themselves with emotional spending. Or someone who intends to change careers but never sends the application, never learns the skill, never takes the first step. Most people live trapped in a loop of intention without action. They tell themselves stories about what they will do someday. They build plans, fantasize about outcomes, imagine success, but they never cross the bridge that leads from imagination to manifestation. This is where the wealthy separate themselves. Wealthy individuals do not rely on intention alone. They turn intention into movement. They turn clarity into execution. They turn vision into daily, consistent, meaningful action. They understand the universal law that everything expands through use. Skills expand through practice. Wealth expands through strategy. Confidence expands through repetition. Opportunity expands through pursuit. The wealthy are not waiting for the right moment. They create it through aligned action. Think of Sarah Blakely, who had the intention of creating a comfortable undergarment for women. But intention alone would have changed nothing. She took action in the smallest of steps, cutting pantyhose in her bathroom, making prototypes, persistently approaching manufacturers, knocking on doors, refusing to give up when she heard no after no after no. Her intentions were powerful, but her actions were unwavering. That combination turned $5,000 in savings into a $1 billion empire. Or consider Warren Buffett. His intention from a young age was to learn everything he could about investing. But he didn't just intend. He consumed financial reports obsessively, visited companies, studied markets, analyzed patterns, and took action on ideas that others dismissed. His wealth wasn't built on desire, it was built on a lifetime of aligned action repeated with almost ritualistic consistency. But aligned action does not mean overwhelming action. It means intentional, purposeful, deliberate steps taken daily, weekly, consistently. Wealth is less about intensity and more about direction. Many people act with intensity. They hustle for a week, work obsessively for a few days, burn themselves out. But their direction is unclear or inconsistent. Wealthy individuals choose direction first, then apply consistent action toward that direction, even if the steps seem small in comparison to their dreams. Action becomes powerful when it is anchored to identity. When you see yourself as someone destined for abundance, you act differently. You make decisions that support your future self, not your past self. You stop choosing temporary comfort at the cost of long-term prosperity. You stop waiting for motivation and begin moving from commitment. Identity-driven action is unstoppable. It doesn't crumble under stress. It doesn't collapse under doubt. It pushes forward even when you feel uncertain. Look at Amazon, Tesla, Apple. None of these companies appeared fully formed. They were built through aligned action repeated relentlessly, almost obsessively. Steve Jobs obsessed over design details no one else cared about. Jeff Bezos reinvested profits for decades instead of chasing quick wins. Elon Musk bet everything he had multiple times to bring his vision to life. These actions weren't random. They were aligned with the identity each founder held: a visionary, a disruptor, a creator of the future. Alignment is the difference between motion and progress. Many people are in motion all the time. They're busy, active, multitasking, planning, organizing, but they're not progressing. They stay in the same place while convincing themselves they are moving forward. Wealthy individuals do not confuse busyness with effectiveness. They choose actions that matter, actions that compound, actions that move them one step closer to the future they are building. Aligned action requires emotional courage. You must act even when you're afraid. You must move even when you're uncertain. You must trust your intuition even when the outcome is unclear. You must take steps your old identity finds uncomfortable. Without emotional courage, the gap between your intention and your action remains unbridgeable. And without action, your future remains unrealized potential. Think about Elon Musk investing every dollar he had into Tesla and SpaceX, knowing failure was possible, not once, but repeatedly. His actions aligned with his intention to reshape the future of transportation and space travel. He did not wait for permission. He did not wait for comfort. He did not wait for guarantees. He moved because movement was required. In your own life, there are intentions waiting for your action, dreams waiting for your courage, goals waiting for your commitment. Every day you delay action, you reinforce the identity of someone who waits instead of someone who creates. But every action you take, big or small, strengthens the identity of someone capable, determined, and aligned with wealth. The prosperity shift happens the moment you stop acting from your present circumstances and start acting from your future identity. When you make decisions as your wealthiest self, your external world begins to reorganize itself around your inner transformation. Opportunities appear, resources align, people show up. The path that once felt blocked becomes visible. The world does not reward intention, it rewards aligned action. And once your actions finally match the abundance you desire, wealth becomes not just possible, but predictable. Topic 9. The wealth environment. How the people and spaces around you shape your success. There is a truth about wealth that many people resist because it forces them to confront something deeply uncomfortable. You cannot rise into abundance while remaining surrounded by environments that reinforce scarcity. Human beings are shaped far more by their surroundings than they realize. Your habits, your expectations, your emotions, your thoughts, and even your identity are influenced by the people you interact with, the conversations you hear, the energy you absorb, and the spaces you live and work in. You may believe you are acting independently, but your environment is constantly sculpting your mindset, either pushing you toward prosperity or pulling you back into limitation. Your environment is not just physical, it is emotional, it is relational, it is energetic. It is psychological. And if the environment around you is misaligned with the wealth you want to create, it will quietly sabotage your growth no matter how hard you work or how much you desire success. Consider how many people fail to reach their financial potential, not because they lack talent, intelligence, or dedication, but because they are immersed in environments that normalize struggle and discourage ambition. They share their dreams with friends who respond with doubt. They express ideas to family members who project fear. They seek elevation while surrounded by people who feel threatened by growth. And slowly, the weight of those external voices becomes internal dialogue. The environment becomes the script becomes the mindset, and the mindset becomes the limitation. Think about someone who wants to start a business but is surrounded by people who have only ever worked traditional jobs and believe entrepreneurship is dangerous. Even if this person feels inspired initially, the constant exposure to fear-based thinking begins to erode their confidence. Every risk starts to feel larger. Every mistake feels fatal. Every delay feels like proof that they should have played it safe. It isn't lack of ability that holds them back. It's the environment constantly whispering, "Stay where you are." Now consider the opposite scenario. Think of environments where wealth is normalized, where ambition is encouraged, where dreams are celebrated, where perseverance is admired. In those environments, even uncertainty feels manageable. Even failure feels educational rather than catastrophic. Surround yourself with people who believe in possibility, and possibility becomes your default state. Surround yourself with people who fear success, and fear becomes your ceiling. Look at the stories of the wealthiest individuals in the world: the Jeff Bezos, the Oprah Winfreys, the Warren Buffetts, the Sarah Blakeleys, the Elon Musks. Almost every one of them intentionally crafted environments that supported growth and expansion. Bezos surrounded himself with thinkers who challenged convention. Oprah surrounded herself with mentors who saw her potential before she could see it herself. Buffett isolated himself from noise to cultivate focus and clarity. Blakely avoided telling negative people about her dreams until she had built enough self-belief to withstand their doubts. Musk created environments where innovation, experimentation, and high stakes were normal rather than frightening. Wealthy people are not only creators of companies, they are creators of environments. They understand that environment shapes behavior, behavior shapes results, and results shape identity. They choose environments intentionally rather than accidentally. They choose conversations that expand them rather than diminish them. They choose relationships that pull them upward rather than anchor them downward. They choose spaces that stimulate clarity, creativity, and ambition rather than chaos and stagnation. But most people live in environments chosen by circumstance, not intention. They stay in social circles out of guilt. They absorb negativity out of habit. They tolerate emotional energy that drains them because they fear being alone. They remain in jobs that suffocate them because familiar discomfort feels safer than unfamiliar possibility. And they wonder why their life does not change. You cannot plant a seed of prosperity in soil that stunts growth and expect it to blossom. The environment matters. Think of a plant placed in a dark room. It doesn't matter how much potential the seed has. Without sunlight, without nourishment, without the right environment, it cannot grow. Humans are the same. You may have incredible potential buried inside you. You may have ideas capable of changing industries. You may have resilience, talent, creativity, and drive. But if your environment constantly dims your light, your growth becomes compromised. This does not mean you must cut people out of your life in dramatic ways. It means you must elevate your awareness of how different environments affect your energy. Notice who leaves you feeling inspired and who leaves you feeling depleted. Notice who speaks possibility and who speaks limitation. Notice the spaces where your creativity expands and the spaces where it contracts. Notice whether your home feels like a sanctuary or a source of stress. Notice whether your workplace elevates your ambition or suffocates it. The more aware you become, the clearer your next steps will be. Wealthy people curate their environment the way artists curate their tools. They protect their energy the way investors protect their assets. They limit exposure to negativity, not because they are fragile, but because they understand how powerful environmental influence is. They spend time with people who challenge them, inspire them, and elevate their perspective. They place themselves in rooms where success is normalized rather than doubted. They invest in mentors, communities, and experiences that shift their internal standards upward. One of the reasons masterminds, mentorship programs, and entrepreneurial communities are so transformational is not because they teach new information. You can find information anywhere, but because they provide an environment where striving for more is not only accepted, but expected. Stepping into a new environment often shifts a person's identity faster than any strategy alone could. When you see others succeeding, you begin to believe you can too. When you hear conversations about abundance, your subconscious begins to reinterpret what is possible. When you are surrounded by growth-minded individuals, your own growth accelerates. Even your physical environment influences your wealth. Cluttered spaces create mental chaos. Poor lighting drains your energy. Disorganized workspaces lower productivity and clarity. Spaces that lack beauty or intention dampen creativity. Wealthy individuals intentionally design their environments to support focus, calm, clarity, and abundance. They understand that the space around them affects the space within them. Imagine walking into a room that feels open, spacious, bright, intentional, and inspiring. You naturally breathe differently. You think differently. You behave differently. Now imagine stepping into a room that is cramped, chaotic, dim, and cluttered. Your body tightens. Your mind feels heavy. Your creativity shrinks. Your environment is communicating with you constantly, even when you do not consciously notice it. If you want to step into a wealthier life, you must step into wealthier environments, internally and externally. You must surround yourself with people who raise your standards. You must spend time in spaces that elevate your mindset. You must cultivate environments that nourish your expansion rather than reinforce your past. Because here is the truth. You cannot become the wealthiest version of yourself while living inside the environment built for your lower self. At some point, you must choose environments that align with your future, not your history. The moment you do, your mindset elevates, your decisions sharpen, your identity shifts, and your wealth begins to reflect the environment you've chosen to inhabit. Topic 10. The turning point. Claiming the wealth you were meant for. There comes a moment in every person's journey when life stands still. Not on the outside, but on the inside. A moment when everything you've believed, everything you've feared, everything you've doubted, everything you've carried from your past rises to the surface and asks a single, defining question. Are you ready to become the person you were always meant to be? Not the person you settled for. Not the person shaped by your environment. Not the person limited by fear, family patterns, or the expectations of others. But the person your soul has been quietly calling you toward, the wealthier, stronger, wiser, more courageous version of you that has always existed beneath the layers of conditioning. This moment is happening right now, and it is not an accident. You didn't land on this video randomly. You didn't arrive at this message by chance. Something in you has been searching for clarity, searching for answers, searching for permission to want more than what you've known. Something inside you is tired of being held back by old stories. Something inside you is ready to stop surviving and start living. Something inside you is ready for wealth, not just financial wealth, but emotional wealth, spiritual wealth, mental wealth, and the wealth of a life lived fully, boldly, and intentionally. And here is the truth you may not have allowed yourself to believe. You were never meant for a small life. You were never meant to struggle endlessly. You were never meant to carry the weight of your past into your future. You were never meant to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that cannot handle your expansion. You were meant for abundance. You were meant for growth. You were meant for impact. You were meant for wealth, not because of entitlement, but because of alignment. Your desires are not random. They are invitations from your higher self calling you forward. But to reach that wealthier version of you, something must shift. Not in the world, not in your circumstances, not in your bank account, in you. Wealth is not a destination you reach. It is a frequency you embody. It is the internal state of someone who knows they are worthy of more, capable of more, destined for more. It is the energy of someone who refuses to let fear dictate their decisions. It is the mindset of someone who walks boldly toward their future instead of passively drifting through their present. The world is filled with people who live their entire lives waiting for courage, waiting for clarity, waiting for the right moment, waiting for someone to choose them, waiting for a sign. But the truth is that waiting is just fear disguised as logic. And every day you wait, you reinforce the identity of someone who is not ready for wealth. But you are ready. You are more ready than you realize. Everything you've been through has prepared you for this moment. Every setback taught you resilience. Every disappointment strengthened your perseverance. Every fear forced you inward to meet your strength. Every failure shaped your wisdom. Every difficult experience refined your emotional intelligence. And every limitation you've lived with has brought you to the edge of transformation. The question is not whether you're ready. The question is whether you're willing. Willing to release the identity that no longer serves you. Willing to let go of the beliefs that were never yours to begin with. Willing to step away from environments that pull you backward. Willing to silence the inner critic that has kept you small. Willing to replace fear with courage, doubt with trust, hesitation with action, and scarcity with abundance. Wealthy individuals are not defined by their bank accounts. They are defined by their decisions. At some point, every one of them made a decision that changed everything. A decision to trust themselves when others doubted them. A decision to keep going when the world told them to stop. A decision to see opportunity where others saw limitation. A decision to believe in a future that didn't yet exist. And that decision, made again and again, birthed their success. Now it is your turn to make that decision. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Imagine the version of you who has already achieved everything you desire. The version who is financially free. The version who feels confident, powerful, clear, and abundant. The version who wakes up with purpose and sleeps with peace. The version who has rewritten their family legacy. The version who walks into rooms with presence. The version who inspires others simply by being themselves. That version of you is not a fantasy. It is a blueprint of what is possible. And you step into it not through wishing, but through becoming, through choosing, through aligning your thoughts, emotions, actions, and environment with the life you want. This is your turning point. The moment when you stop letting fear speak louder than your potential. The moment when you stop making decisions based on your past and start making decisions based on your future. The moment when you stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. The moment when you claim the wealth, internal and external, that you were always meant to hold. Wealth does not come to those who wait. It comes to those who rise. Rise into your courage. Rise into your clarity. Rise into your self-belief. Rise into your worthiness. Rise into the identity of someone who no longer asks, "Can I do this?" but confidently declares, "I am becoming the person who does this." Everything changes the moment you decide to stop living at the level of your fears and start living at the level of your future. Everything expands the moment you trust yourself more than your excuses. Everything aligns the moment you step into the wealth frequency with intention and conviction. And when that moment happens, when you choose to rise, wealth begins to flow, not as a miracle, but as a natural expression of who you have become. Your life is calling you to step into a greater version of yourself. Not later, not eventually, now. This is your turning point. This is your invitation. This is your moment of becoming. And if you choose to step forward, everything you dream of has the power to become your reality. Before you go, take a moment and breathe this in. If this video spoke to you, if it awakened something inside you, if it made you see your potential with new eyes, then don't let this moment pass. Moments like this are rare. They're the spark that ignites transformation, but only if you act on them. So here's your invitation. Subscribe to the Success and Prosperity Code so you never lose momentum on your journey toward wealth, abundance, and the highest version of yourself. Hit the like button so this message reaches more people who need this breakthrough just as much as you did. Share this video with someone you care about, someone who deserves to rise, to expand, to finally step into their power. You might change their entire path with a single click. And leave a comment below telling me your biggest insight, your biggest breakthrough, or the identity you are choosing to step into from this moment on. Your declaration might be the very thing that turns intention into transformation. This is your time. This is your path. This is your rise. I'm here to walk with you every step of the way. Let's create wealth from the inside out, together.